Welcome to Nur eine Frage, or just one question, or as we've recently started calling it in our little team, N1F. N1F is available as a podcast, but also as a video and as a written interview. And with every question, we send out a newsletter with background information. You can subscribe to the newsletter at ZEIT.de/N1F. And that's also where you find everything else related to Nur eine Frage, the videos, the podcast, and the written pieces. Welcome to Just One Question. Here we ask questions that sound simple but are very hard to answer to the best expert we can find anywhere in the world. Today my question is, will our children still need a driver's license? The question sounds strange. In search of an answer, I traveled to San Francisco together with my colleague Nicholas Kilian, the ZEIT correspondent in Silicon Valley. I took a self-driving car from there and rode to Mountain View. Here's the company that invented this car, Waymo. In San Francisco and Silicon Valley, the white Waymo cars with their bulky sensors are everywhere. You can simply order one through an app and it will take you almost anywhere you want to go. The company is rapidly expanding the service to more and more cities, this year also to London and Tokyo. So Waymo has largely fulfilled this long-held dream of cars that can simply drive themselves. We talk about all of this today with Dmitri Dolgov. He is not only one of the leading technologists in the field of self-driving cars. He was also one of the founders of Google's secret self-driving car program 17 years ago. Today he is the CEO of Waymo. The company is owned by Google's parent company, Alphabet. Dmitri was born and raised in the Soviet Union, studied physics and mathematics in Moscow, and did a postdoc at Stanford, where he joined the team for the famous DARPA Urban Challenge in 2007, in which self-driving cars had to navigate an urban landscape. Dmitri is a pure researcher, but the CEO of a profit-driven business enterprise. Even so, he is exactly the right person for this question. The question of this podcast and video show will be, will our children ever need a driver's license? So I have a 5-year-old son. Will he still need in Berlin a driver's license in 15 years?
I don't know if he will need one. I hope 15 years from now, especially in Berlin, there'd be Waymo as a transportation option that's easily available and hopefully preferred by your son.
So you can break the news now. Will you come to Berlin in 1 or 2 years? Are there plans?
We'll absolutely come to Berlin. I'm not going to give you an exact timeline today.
German manufacturers will be really interested in that. Can you share a vision about coming to Germany maybe?
Nothing specific that I would share today, but we are, as you know, expanding rapidly in the United States and planning to expand internationally as well. This year, we've announced that we plan to start operating in London and Tokyo. And beyond that, of course, we plan to expand worldwide.
I think we should take a step back. Why? So we came here by Waymo. We drove the highway. So the car drove the highway. And if you took Waymos over the years, and I started using the little Firefly, so there was a little kind of tiny test car in the early days, and it was really anxious and just moving carefully around. Yeah. And now it's really driving fast on the highway. It's really interesting to see that. So something changed. Can you kind of tell us the history of all of this? Obviously, it's a totally different setup now. So how did it start? How did you come to the point where you have the feeling there's a real human driving?
It has been a long journey. And technology, we started in 2009. Of course, the technology that we have today is nothing like the technology of the early days. The core of it is AI. You tend to think of Waymo as the most mature manifestation of AI in the physical world, and that's been our focus over the years. And we've gone through, you mentioned Firefly, that was the third generation of what we call now the Waymo driver. And with every generation, there's been breakthroughs in AI and technology, as well as the hardware that the cars are equipped with. So Firefly was our first prototype. That was, in a way, our kind of 0 to 1 moment. That was the car that we used to drive our first fully autonomous, kilometer without a person in the driver's seat. In fact, that car did not even have a steering wheel or pedals. Then we worked, and that forced us to build the technology and start posing this very, very important question of evaluation and validation, and what does it mean for the car to be ready. Then we moved to the 4th generation of our system, of the Waymo driver. That was on the Pacifica minivan, and that was the platform upon which we started regular, fully autonomous operations and did our initial commercial launch. That was it. We opened it up to the public in Phoenix, Arizona, in 2020. So there's been significant breakthroughs in technology by that time. The point of that 4th generation system and the service that we launched was not to scale it globally, not even in the United States. It was to learn what it means to take this technology all the way to customers and carry it through end to end, from regular development, validation, regular deployment, and 24/7 operations and learning from customers. And we took all the learnings from the technology, from the customers, into the next generation, which is the 5th generation, which is what's out in the fleet today, which is what you probably used to get here. Mm-hmm. That's the 5th generation of the Waymo driver, and it's on the JLR I-PACE vehicle. The big qualitative transition from the 4th generation to the 5th generation was a strong bet on AI primary as the underlying technology. So that helped us achieve scalability, safety, performance, and what you're referring to as kind of the natural, assertive but safe and confident feeling of that system.
Confident would be the word. It's a totally different feeling now. I even have the feeling, it's a little bit too fast. It's around the corners maybe, and there are people there.
Even for a German driver.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So how did you? So what exactly changed? So did you train it with real human data now, or what's the real difference between 4 and 5?
We significantly changed the architecture of the system, and we used AI as kind of the backbone of the AI of the Waymo driver. We do train it initially by kind of observing how humans drive. So that is, you're absolutely right, the core of where many of the kind of natural behaviors come from. However, we don't just train it by imitating human drivers. We find that that's insufficient to reach the level of safety and performance. Yeah. So we do other things on top of that, like reinforcement learning and feedback in a closed loop, kind of simulated ecosystem.
Does it also adapt bad habits of people's driving?
We have the feeling.
It shouldn't. We use highly trained operators to give it examples of good driving behavior.
Like real people.
That's right. Yes. That's right. So it observes how humans generally drive in the world, right? You don't have to drive our own car for the Waymo driver, for the Waymo AI, to kind of understand the patterns of driving, right? That you could, and that's the bulk of the data, but it's very noisy, as you pointed out, because it's not your own car, and people drive in all kinds of ways, many of which you don't necessarily want to imitate. Then on top of that, we give it examples to imitate from well-trained, very good drivers. And then on top of that, we give it feedback, through reinforcement learning type methods of, what we want it to do and what we don't want it to do.
The most interesting part for me is the social interaction, which is traffic. So it's not about, you know all the rules, so it's easy to drive a car. Obviously, you have to know if this person over there wants to cross the street or just checking the phone and stuff like that. Or what I realized at one point in time, obviously, Waymos understand if I honk. So I had the situation, the car stopped and I wanted to go in, and then someone honked, and obviously it decided to go some meters further down the road and stopped again because it was a different situation now. So there's a context awareness, which is fascinating. So how do you do that?
Absolutely. So this is understanding the context of the scene, understanding for different actors in the world, other cars, pedestrians, cyclists, understanding their intent. Understanding of intent comes from many cues. It's the evolution of the scene, it's visual cues, it's maybe audio like a honk, and all of that leads to the Waymo driver making predictions about how the world might unfold, which then we can use to make the best driving decision so that we can operate safely, smoothly, and predictably in this, as you said, highly complex, nuanced, and social environment.
What is this the Waymo still struggling with today? Like, what are situations where, like, it maybe doesn't know what to do?
We're driving at more than 4 million miles every week, and we are operating in 10 cities, with real customers across the U.S. and expanding very rapidly. So I don't, that what we call the operating domain that we already covered pretty much most of the driving environment, and it performs very well with a safety record that we're extremely proud of. Now, it doesn't drive in all conditions, so I'll give you one example. For example, today, we are not yet operating without a driver in cities where there's harsh winter weather. That is something that we're planning to expand
So
to
if
over the
there's
course
snow
of
in New
this year.
York, you would need, you're not there yet, but you would need a driver to be sure that it works?
Well, today, we're not operating in New York, and the system is very capable.
Just because of the snow there.
As an example, you're absolutely right that we are right now going through the process of validating the performance in those conditions. Mm-hmm. So the Waymo driver is absolutely capable of operating in snow, in freezing weather, but we are going through a very rigorous validation and evaluation process before we actually remove the driver and open it up to the public.
If you never saw a Waymo, you won't realize how many sensors are in the game. So maybe you should explain that for the German audience who hasn't been in San Francisco. You have all these LiDAR sensors rotating and stuff. Can you just give us an overview of the technology you're using?
Absolutely. So the Waymo driver uses 3 main sensing modalities. There's cameras, there is LiDAR, and then there's radar. All 3 sensing modalities give our car complete 360-degree coverage around the vehicle. So the Waymo driver simultaneously is looking all around the vehicle. And each of the sensing modalities has its own strength. Just because of the physics of it, they're very nicely complementary. Right? So cameras, of course, give you color and very useful kind of visual information. But it's a passive sensor. So it has limitations if you're driving in very dark conditions or, for example, when you have bright sun shining directly in your face. LiDAR and radar, they're active sensors. So they kind of blast energy out into the world. So LiDAR, and they just use different wavelengths.
So to explain that, LiDAR would be the laser radar kind of thing. So the rotating thing on top and on the side, it's a laser system that rotates all the time and scans the environment.
So LiDAR is it's a laser, and it shoots out laser beams many millions times per second, and it spins around. And in doing so, every time it sends out a beam of laser, it measures the time that it takes that laser beam to go out and come back. And by doing so, you can measure the distance to whatever object it happens to hit. And if you do that and you kind of sweep around the full 360 degree of the scene, it gives you this 3D representation of the world around you, and it kind of directly measures that. And radar is similar, but it uses a different wavelength. And the power of radar is that it can see much farther, especially in different weather conditions like fog or rain or snow. It's much better than human eyes, or much better than cameras. It could just punch through those conditions and get returns on objects that are well beyond the kind of visible range of a human eye.
So in the world, like everyone is talking about large language models, ChatGPT, kind of this is the technology behind it. And I don't know how many people know that, but one of the very important fundamentals of this technology was developed at Google. So the company you're also at. Is that also a reason, this whole AI revolution we're seeing now, does it have something to do with self-driving cars?
It is not at all a coincidence. I would say that the fundamental breakthroughs in AI and that whole technical area, like transformers, or all of the innovation that went into being able to create these massive high-capacity models, that is what led to the breakthroughs in the large language models and the LLMs and the VLMs. And we saw similar trends in kind of our version of AI, AI in the physical world. So we heavily leverage transformers. We are using all of the breakthroughs in the foundational model space to build kind of the Waymo AI, and that's what led to the acceleration. But it's not the manifest kind of the fundamental technology and the breakthroughs there were shared, but the specific manifestation of AI in the digital world versus AI for us in the physical world, that is different.
How does it help? Can you give an example?
How does the fundamental technology, or how, so there's two.
And
Let me give you an intuition there. First of all, transformers are a very powerful, general purpose architecture, and you see, applications of it across the board with, and that led to major breakthroughs in capability and performance. If you think about how transformers are used to model language and the understanding of the semantics of words and sentences and how they relate to each other and what matters, one of the things that was very powerful is the ability to learn, what in the structure of language provides the most important context for the flow of sentences and the meaning of any word.
So
right?
to predict the next...
To predict the next word, to properly have this narrative flow, you need that technology. If you think about the task of driving, it is not unlike the flow of sentences or language. As we discussed a little while ago, scene level context matters. The semantics of the scene matter. The semantics of every object matter. So you can kind of think of, and it's, as Jochen, you pointed out, driving is a very interactive social task. And so is language. So if transformers are so good at modeling the language, natural language, and dialogue, you can, in a way, think of driving as kind of a dialogue that different actors and people are having, but not in the space of words and sentences, in the space of kind of body language of how you move through the space. So that's why the fundamental technology has been so powerful in both the digital AI and the physical AI for Waymo.
So when I'm standing at a traffic light, or to cross the street or not, you would predict my next move, you would predict a next word in...
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And you can think of, transformers, if it's the next word, maybe what you said, or what was written in the previous paragraph, or what you said a few minutes ago, there's some key, contextual, semantic piece of information that really matters to the next word.
Yeah.
Similar to the task of driving, right? Something that happened in the entire scene, maybe with a different actor, is very important for what you're going to do next.
Other cars on an intersection, people, cyclists, how they move.
Exactly.
And also how the Waymo moves, right? Every every move the Waymo does interacts with the world and influences the world, also the behavior of others, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You're exactly right.
Okay.
I'm most of the time when I go through the city once per drive, I'm confused by people doing silly stuff. At least in Berlin. I'm not sure about San Francisco, but it's a nightmare to drive in Berlin. So I really do not know what people trying. So they jump in front of my car. They do silly stuff all the time. So how do you deal with these uncertainties that are there? So safety first, I know. But what do you do? So you can't just stop driving when you're confused. So how do you decide in these situations?
Well, first of all, I should say that I will take it as a compliment that you think Berlin is, more confusing than San Francisco.
It is. Definitely, believe me.
But to your core question of how do you deal with ambiguity and uncertainty, that is one of the hardest problems in this whole space. And I don't have a simple kind of one-line answer to how we solve it, because it is the evolution of a tremendous amount of work, in our entire AI ecosystem. And the investment in the building of the foundation model, the specialization of that foundation model into the Waymo driver, the building of the simulation of the virtual environment in which we can train and evaluate the driver, as well as what we call the critic, which is a mechanism for us to decide, what is appropriate behavior and what is not. And through the evolution of all of those components, if you put it all together, then you do get the behaviors you're talking about, where the Waymo driver is able to interpret, understand these very subtle cues that are not very clearly defined, and then behave in a way that is safe and understandable and smooth and predictable for people inside the car and all of the other actors around the vehicle.
And if in doubt, you just stop. Is that a solution? If you're on the highway, you can. So
the Waymo driver will it will optimize and prioritize safety above all. So under conditions where there is some ambiguity, it will err on the side of caution. Sure. But you are absolutely right that just stopping is not a viable option in many contexts. Freeways, intersections, any high-speed road.
So what do you do?
You consider all of the possible actions, not unlike a good professional human driver, and you pick the safest course of action while taking the kind of the uncertainty and ambiguity of the situation into account. That's what makes a good defensive driver. Right? If you don't know something, you think about what could happen in the future, and you plan your actions accordingly. So it's not, maybe another way to say it is that it is insufficient to be a good, safe driver to be purely reactive with kind of the geometric properties of the world. What you need to do is understand the deep semantic nature of the scene, the task, make multiple predictions probabilistic predictions about what might happen in the future, and then pick the safest course of action.
If in doubt, you can call someone, right? So it's like you can call the Philippines and their operators. And if the car doesn't know what to do, it can ask real people.
That's right. We have what we call remote assistance, which is humans that our car can pose, ask for confirmation actions in some context, and sometimes pose questions too. We have operators in Michigan, Arizona, and outside the country. I want to be very clear that the question that we were discussing, where the car is moving at high speed, you absolutely cannot. Exactly, right? It's funny, right?
Yeah.
You absolutely cannot, call for help and rely on these humans to make real-time safety-critical decisions. So I want to be very clear about that point. The Waymo driver is always in control. And the Waymo driver is responsible for the safety-critical real-time decisions. However, in some context, when the Waymo driver, wants additional confirmation, this is when we might call for assistance for humans.
There are these famous thought experiments. I think around 2018, I think that was a lot discussed. I think trolley problem is called, right? Where a self-driving cars has a very a moral dilemma, either hitting a concrete wall and likely killing the passengers, or driving into pedestrians. Is this kind of moral dilemma, or is this something of any relevance for your work? Do you think about this, or?
We used to get that question quite a bit. I think
Yes.
the trolley problem is more of, it was designed as, more of a thought experiment to, more deeply understand human nature and kind of human, morals. In practice, this is not something that is, relevant to, building safe AI in the physical world, or, the Waymo driver. And, we've driven at this point more than 200 million fully autonomous rider-only miles. I don't think I've, ever seen a situation that had anything to do even remotely with, kind of the setup of the trolley problem.
Okay.
So you asked that before, but I want to go deeper into this. What are the major problems these days? It's snow, obviously, is something you have to deal with. What are other problems where you are desperate? How do we do that?
At this point, I would say we have the technical foundation and the technical capability that does not have any, significant gaps to deploying this, the Waymo driver in all kinds of conditions across the globe. So now it's not
across the globe.
Across the globe.
Interesting. Come back to that.
It is about, so we're kind of, as a company, we've moved from the era of scientific research and deep engineering to an area of commercialization and rapid scaling. So the core technology is there. So now it is about specialization, right? We're not driving, I mentioned London and, Tokyo earlier. We're not driving there today. So the core technology...
Different rules. Totally different.
A lot of things are very different, right? How signs, look like, of course, in London and Japan, or UK and Japan, you drive on the other side of the road. So
also in London, I think, I'm not sure, but I think in London it's also the other side of the road.
Exactly.
Just joke it.
So, you're saying London, they do both?
So how do you? Is it just a switch in the AI whatever setup? It could be complicated, couldn't it?
We're actually finding that the core capability of the technology, the Waymo AI, is generalizing incredibly well. But we do have to go through the cycle of collecting the data, understanding and characterizing the environment, using some of the data to train and specialize the Waymo driver, and then validate it before we deploy. In some ways, the driving on the other side of the road is maybe a kind of a bigger switch for a human driver than it is for the Waymo driver. As we've discussed just a little bit earlier, I think you were spot on about commenting on what makes this task hard. It's the understanding of the semantics of the scene, all of the different actors, being able to see really well and make the right decisions. So if you think about that, how do pedestrians behave? There's subtle differences, but fundamentally, that core understanding, that carries over. Yeah. And then you can train, that, in this particular area in the world, you have to drive on the other side of the road. Computers are very good at adapting that to that.
But you have to relearn, so how people in Moscow, just an example, or Sicily, or Berlin, or London, I don't know. I drove in Tokyo, London, and Sicily, and Berlin, and San Francisco, and it's totally different. It's a totally different game. The rules are different. You ignore most of the signs in several parts. Vietnam is a great example. It's a nightmare for people like me to drive there. So you have to relearn everything from scratch.
The way I would say it is that you have to specialize and teach the system to adapt to the current social conventions and maybe, social. So the signs are different.
People ignore red lights all the time. So what does Waymo do? It's the only car stopping at the red light, or is it going with the flow?
No, we're going to follow the rules, and we're going to be the best, safest, defensive driver.
Stopping or not?
At red lights? Yes.
Everywhere on the planet?
I would imagine so, but I guess we'll, when it comes up as a practical question.
So it's if the traffic breaks down, the Waymo stops. There are parts of the world where you just can't stop.
Well, it's the infrastructure. I see. If the infrastructure breaks down, then the car would handle it appropriately. I was talking more about the normal circumstances where we do design and teach the Waymo driver to obey the rules of traffic and be the safest. But it will always prioritize safety, and it will always choose the safest course of action.
There's also, I'm just extrapolating, there's a way of communication. You honk a lot in several parts of the world to say, hey, I'm there. So can you learn that as a Waymo driver to, communicate with honking?
This is actually something that our cars do today.
Really?
Yeah, they're able to honk, and they use it, in some conditions where if there's another, actor or another car that is behaving, in a way that the Waymo driver deems anomalous or dangerous, and maybe there's an indication that, another car doesn't see us, as often happens if there's maybe a car that's backing out. Humans don't have, the same 360-degree vision, and then our car, might honk and just give them, an additional input to those humans.
And the AI just knows where it is. It's in Vietnam, it's in Tokyo, and in Vietnam I might honk a bit more than in Germany. Is it working like this?
Well, we're not operating. I want to be careful about making comments about we have not started collecting data or testing there. But across the U.S., there are subtle differences in how people drive. Imagine downtown San Francisco versus more of a residential area of Phoenix. So there's some subtle differences. And of course, when we go and we expand internationally, we go to places like London or Tokyo. There are the rules are different, and the social norms are different. So we will teach the Waymo driver to adopt to those, and always in all circumstances be the safest driver, but the one that fits predictably and smoothly into the entire kind of traffic flow locally.
Is the world unfair to Waymos? So I assume that your cars have to be much better at the end than a human driver, because it's totally intolerable that a Waymo harms anyone. So how do you deal with that? So the standards are really, really high. So you shouldn't make any failure at all. And there's a big discussion. If there's something going wrong, you read it everywhere on the planet, always. So I think it's huge pressure.
Yeah, you said, is it unfair? I would say it's understandable and, reasonable for society to hold this technology to a high bar. And it's on us to earn the trust of our riders and of communities where we operate. And we do that by, having a transparent dialogue across, all levels, and by sharing the empirical data about the performance of our system. So today, we are extremely proud of the safety record of the Waymo driver. For collisions involving serious injuries or worse, we are 10 times better than our human benchmarks. If you look at any collision involving a vulnerable road user, a pedestrian or a cyclist, we are about 13 times better than human benchmarks. So this is based on an analysis of the 127 million miles of our fully autonomous driving. So with that safety record, there's that, an order of magnitude reduction in serious collisions, and the benefits of those technologies are becoming more and more clear. And I think there is a massive opportunity to address the status quo. Mm-hmm. Let's not forget the status quo is, in my mind, is horrific and completely unacceptable. Every year across the world, about 1.2 million people lose their lives to traffic collisions. This is one person losing their life every 26 seconds.
Yeah, but so society tolerates if people kill people, obviously. So there's a deal in society that, so we are discussing, is it really necessary that many people die in traffic? But it's obviously okay if a human is involved in an accident, but it's not acceptable that a machine, a robot, an AI is the cause of something bad. So you're not, so I don't think you accept that as a human being. It's just like that. So it's really hard for you to establish the infrastructure. You always get these bad news if something happens.
Again, I think it's a natural emotional reactions from humans, and it's a natural stance of society to a new technology. Mm-hmm. But I go back to the fundamental points that status quo is not okay. Mm-hmm. And we have the technology that, when deployed at scale, can cure this
accidents,
or make massive, really meaningful improvements, save lives. Yeah. And how do we as humans, how does society think through that question? Maybe mention an opinion piece that was published a little while ago in the New York Times by a neurosurgeon, Dr. Slotkin, and he contrasted the performance of the Waymo driver to what often comes up in clinical trials. Mm-hmm. Right? In clinical trials, there is this. Generally in medicine, there is this posture of do no harm, mm-hmm. right? And we require very rigorous protocols and processes for drug testing before we deploy them to the public. But there are cases where the benefits of a new drug and the empirical data is so overwhelmingly positive that it is responsible to take, run the full protocol. And that was the argument that he made, that if, a data is so powerful that it can reduce harm and save lives, we as society, it would be irresponsible for our society to not adopt it.
So what you're telling us is to cure traffic accidents, everyone has to implement Waymo in their cars, right? I fly home, go to Mercedes and tell them, hey, it's really important that you have a Waymo technology in your cars in the future because we have to cure traffic.
If this is the message that you want to amplify.
Let's think about this future, because I still remember my first question, which would be, at one point in time, will you still need a driver's license? So if we look into the future, what's the vision here? You have this bulky leader setup at the moment. Will it be smaller at one point in time, or does it have to be due to physics like that, or can it be much smaller?
It could absolutely be much smaller. Mm-hmm. We'll absolutely get there.
It looks strange, a little bit strange. I'm aware of some cars that already have leader setups, but they are not that bulky. And it's obviously really expensive. So a Waymo car may be like $150K or something. We are discussing that while we are driving here. What's the cost of a Waymo car these days?
I'm not going to share specific numbers today. Sorry,
it's
but
really,
what I will say,
it's really expensive compared to...
I would challenge that. No, the 6 is getting simpler, more capable, and lower cost with every generation of the hardware. And we are right now in the process of deploying or starting to do fully autonomous operations on the 6th generation of the Waymo driver. And with every generation, it's been a very significant cost reduction. And the 6th generation of the Waymo driver, the hardware they're putting on a car, is a fraction of what the previous one cost. In fact, it is comparable to what you would see with kind of an advanced driver system that car manufacturers are putting on the cars today. And that's not, the end of the evolution of the hardware suite. With the 7th generation beyond, they will get simpler. They will be more integrated in the vehicle, and they would be much less expensive. So if fundamentally, if you think about the evolution of all of the relevant hardware, whether it's compute, whether it's radars, whether it's cameras, whether it's lidars, they all follow the same highly predictable, commoditization curves. If you look at what happened with radars used to be bulky, complex, and very expensive. When we had them on planes, when we started putting them on cars, now you can get a decent automotive radar for tens of dollars, maybe 100. There's a slightly different, more advanced version of a radar, often referred to as the imaging radar, and is following a very similar commoditization curve. It's just a couple of years behind. Cameras are mature and commoditized. LiDAR, you're seeing the same trends happening. As you've mentioned, there's many automakers that are putting LiDARs on their production cars, and of course, you also get benefits of scale. So we're seeing the same, reduction in complexity and the same optimization of all the components and the same reduction in cost.
So you're partnering with car manufacturers, like you provide the software, the AI, and the sensors. They provide like the rest, the car. In Germany, we're very proud of our car industry with Volkswagen, Mercedes, and so on. Will they still exist in 10 to 15 years, how like they exist today?
Well, we're building the driver. You still need to put the driver in a car. And our strategy has always been to partner with the car manufacturers across the world. So absolutely.
Will they be more than like metal benders? Like this?
I think building a car is hard. If you think about the technology that goes into building a modern car, it's mind-blowingly impressive. I just think about all the safety advances and just all the other advances that we've seen in cars over the last few decades. It is incredibly impressive, right? So I think that industry will continue to evolve, and then we bring the AI in the physical world. We bring the Waymo driver, and I think it's the combination of the two that taken together will allow us to realize our mission of making roads safer.
I'm aware of a kind of philosophical debate in the industry. Do we really need this expensive LiDAR thingies, or just use the cameras? We at Tesla, we do it without LiDAR. It will work. So how these, obviously you have another opinion, but don't you fear that at one point in time, cameras are enough to do that, what you do today?
It's completely clear and unambiguous to me that you can have better capability, performance, and safety with using multimodal sensing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the physics of the different sensors is so nicely complementary that having your driver, your AI, have access to richer information is purely better. And this is why we're using all three sensing modalities. This is what allowed us to achieve that safety performance that we're seeing today, where we're 10 times better than human drivers when it comes to serious injury involving collisions. I think the physics of the different sensors, that will persist, that will stay with time. So the benefits, the complementarities will persist. However, the form factor, the physical form factor, that will change. Drastically simpler, smaller, and more integrated in the vehicle. And the cost, as we discussed, will also come down. So we'll see what happens in the future. Will the cameras of tomorrow be the same as the cameras of today?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No. Will the radars of tomorrow be the same as radars of today? No. LiDARs, same answer. However, does it make sense to completely get rid of certain sensing modality? I believe you can always do better, and you can cut costs, but you can't cut safety.
Obviously, at the moment, you have a competitive edge, so maybe you are the best in this field these days, but there are startups in China doing all the stuff, and also German manufacturers strive from time to time to compete with you. Do you have the feeling that this edge will still be there in 5 or 10 years?
I think it's a very complex problem to build AI in the physical world that operates in this safety critical environment and has to make safety critical decisions in real time where milliseconds matter. So I don't think the complexity of the problem is such that, with time, it's going to be some quick off the shelf technical solution that can solve the entirety of this problem with that high level of safety that we require. How the field evolves, how the industry evolves over time, we shall see. But we generally consider that if there's more companies, more players in the space, responsible players in the space who are aligned with our mission of making roads safer, everybody benefits. We just get to deploy the benefits of this technology to more people and more places faster.
So like the profitability of Waymo kind of will mostly stem from like the fact that Waymo doesn't need to pay drivers, right? And today still like millions of people like earn their living driving taxi, Uber and other things. But in the future it might be that it will be centralized to one company, to Waymo, I think. How do you look at that?
So over time, like with any revolutionary and a very impactful, very powerful technology, I think there's going to be a reshaping of what we spend our time on. Right? So we tend to think of Waymo as making roads safer, and if you think about some of the most valuable things we have in life, it's lives and time. So we want to give that back. And that does mean replacing the human driver, with the Waymo driver. So with that will come an evolution of the kind of the workforce, the job market, which is something that has been a nature of kind of how we evolve as society, in the over the course of history. But with that new technology, first of all, I will mention today there are many places and many areas where there is today a shortage of drivers. So, for example, Japan has a shortage of taxi drivers. In trucking, U.S. has a shortage of trucking drivers. There is personally owned vehicles where you just get your time back, right? And on top of that, the industry that we are creating, this ecosystem of partnership, is leading to new job creation of people to maintain and operate fleets of autonomous vehicles.
Okay. If you look really far into the future, you're a physicist and mathematician, so at one point in time, will we see something like in the cities, you have just a flow equation of cars, going around, and you just jump on a car that's by chance stops in front of your house, and kind of the city knows where you are heading. You know what I mean? So it's like a big AI kind of thinking the traffic of a city, and the cars are just elements in this, big equation of moving people around. Can you imagine a society like this? So there's I don't need my car in front of my house. It's just I go out and the city knows where I want to go, and it just organizes this for me. There are no timetables anymore. It's just a flow equation.
That's an
Did you
interesting.
ever think about this? I'm sure you did.
I do think about kind of the vision and what that will mean for transportation and cities. I do believe that we are going to switch more towards this, transportation on demand, seamless, frictionless transportation on demand.
Mm-hmm.
So wherever you are, not just you said, hey, your car is at home, or wherever you happen to park it, and then you have to think about that, and that constrains you. With the Waymo driver, whenever you need to go somewhere, you just pull out your phone and a car shows up, takes you where you want to go. So I do think that's the future. Waymo is my primary mode of transportation. I find it, and my family's as well, I find it very liberating. So not having to worry about where is your car. I like walking. So I, can, start walking to my destination. If I need to get somewhere sooner, I just call a Waymo. It shows up, it picks me up where I am and takes me where I want to go. And then I don't have to worry. Like it doesn't, you're not anchored to your personal vehicle. And I'm not even talking about other not so fun aspects of owning a vehicle, like maintenance, insurance, parking spaces, all of that goes away. So I think in your vision, that I absolutely see happening. And there's the question of you talked about, the global flow equation. And we are seeing some of that even today with how we're able to optimize the fleet through the center. So I think you can get strong benefits and massive wins in efficiency if you through like optimal and predictive fleet allocation and routing, and that leads to better usage of the transportation infrastructure, and it leads to a better experience for the rider, where you can minimize the ETA, and there's always a car that's available nearby. In terms of the evolution of the cities, there's a massive opportunity to use the space better. I think in many cities, take San Francisco, take Berlin, think about the best space in kind of the most interesting part of the city. A lot of it's taken up by parking spots or garages. And personally owned vehicles are just sitting there 90% of the time. They're not being used. And I think we can change that.
But it's fun to have a car and drive around.
Absolutely.
You don't own a car?
I own a car. I rarely use it. I use Waymo most of the time, but absolutely, if you like driving, people will absolutely have the ability to drive if they want to. Look at what happened with horses, right?
Maybe in 10 years, the human drivers will just disturb the traffic of self-driving cars, right? Because they don't behave.
Well, and look, the Waymo driver is the new technology. So it's on us to, adapt to how humans use our roadways today. I don't want to say that I find it satisfying with how we've set up this whole space, again, because somebody loses their life every 26 seconds. But this is where we are, and we are the newcomers. So, it's on us to adapt to it and earn the trust over the course of time.
So when will I be able to sit in a car and sleep, wake up on my holiday destination in Italy, for example?
In Italy? Well, you're based in San Francisco, so hopefully you could do that today.
Yosemite.
In the years to come.
In the years to come.
Yeah.
Just sleep, wake up, be there.
Yeah, and this is, you get your time back. You can do work, you can relax, you can listen to your favorite music at full volume and not have to worry about, another human in the car. You get privacy, you get security. That's the value proposition.
To come back to the first question, will our kids need a driver's license in Berlin? Let's say in 20 years. Or will we see all these self-driving vehicles all over the place?
We will see self-driving vehicles all over the place. They will not need a driver's license, but if they want to drive, because they like it, I think they'll have that ability.
Thank you.
You're welcome.